Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. So, over the weekend I tried to put in my new video card. It didn't quite work. I'm going to give it one more chance, then I will have to send the video card back. It seems to me, as odd as it may seem, that there is just a level of attempts that the trusted platform module software in my CPU, my AMD Ryzen CPU, does. Even if I put in a new video card and then take it out and then put in the old video card, it's still trying to call home to the wrong address um, for a while, even though the equipment's no longer in there, which kind of would make sense if it was like a USB device that could be removed or not. But it doesn't really make sense for a hardware device. And inherently, the errors I'm seeing in the event viewer may not be 100% directly connected to my computer just straight up black screening, rebooting, breaking RAM, things like that, that may have all been fixed several weeks ago just with installing a new BIOS update. I did run some 3D Mark tests, and for DirectX 12 and 970 GTX, it's pretty awful. It's getting like 20, 22 frames per second. It's just not really acceptable for DirectX 12. It can squeak out 1080p at 60 frames per second on DirectX 11 games. Almost every game most people would have is still DirectX 11 games, but I would want to be future forward in that, and I definitely don't want to just end up never using my 2070 RTX graphics card. I finished Ni no Kuni. There was a lot of post-game content, or at least a decent amount of post-game content, and it's just didn't really interest me after all is said and done. The problem with having post-game content certainly is going to be the case that you have to have enjoyed the main game content in the first place, and that's just not what happened. Like, Ni no Kuni is very much a bait and switch game without getting into too much detail, where it pretends like it's going to be this kid-friendly Pokemon-esque Studio Ghibli animated game, and then you kind of realize fairly quickly that while it has monsters like Pokemon, it's really not like Pokemon. You don't try that hard to capture or grind them. There's a specific limit on how many characters you can capture, and that's randomized. So you only can capture something if the game randomly decides that it's capturable, compared to Pokemon where almost everything is capturable if you can at least get its stats down low enough. And you have in Pokemon different kinds of Pokeballs to make it easier to capture. No such thing in Ni no Kuni. The Studio Ghibli animation is pathetically small and insignificant in the game. Seems like they probably worked on doing some animations for about 3 months and then they were kicked from the team. It's oddly the opposite problem that you see in almost any other games where people don't get credited and they do deserve the credit. In this case, Studio Ghibli is being overemphasized and overcredited as if they had a hand in every single animation, when really they had a hand in probably every 20th animation at best. The rest of the animations are just in-game animations, obviously not made by Ghibli. Ni no Kuni is weird in that it has a kind of pointless casino gambling element that doesn't really make sense. It all sorts of makes sense if you remember that originally Ni no Kuni was a Nintendo DS game. And so if you didn't have the internet, if you didn't have a lot of games, and you really wanted it to stretch, the grindiness of Ni no Kuni starts to make more sense, or to have a gambling mini game starts to make a little bit of sense. But then there's like references to alcohol or bottles that look like alcohol in the casino also, so you have gambling and alcohol, which would bump the age rating up. The story's pretty awful and generic. There's really not much I can say good about it at all. And it's really a shame, because this is the game Ni no Kuni would have been the game that I would have wanted to play as a nice introduction towards Japanese RPGs, but if anything, it just reminded me that I probably shouldn't play Japanese RPGs. It's not relevant compared to playing, say, Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy, because the other Ni no Kuni games, Ni no Kuni 2 and the mobile game, are not really worth playing either, in my opinion, after playing the first game. So yeah, it was a mess. Speaking of potential messes, I'm back to enabling quality of service on my router to see if that will help the internet drop frame issue. I think that may very much still be my ISP's own problem, so but I enabled some as simplistic as I hope I could get it, quality of service on my router to get frame pacing to be like network frame pacing to be somewhat consistent. At the moment, everything looks good. I've had, in the first 7 minutes here, no drop network frames. I've also had no significant amount of frames missed to rendering lag, and I think the rendering lag in particular probably was coming from something weird set up on the either CPU or the GPU. You'd almost assume it would be, and hopefully that's been fixed. Hopefully everything's been fixed, but I kind of seriously doubt it. The problem here certainly also is that Windows can do an update whenever it wants and really won't tell you if it does. I mean, not if you're not paying attention, certainly. So anything wrong with the network, anything wrong with rendering lag, anything wrong with anything could very well be a Windows update with messing up something. There's just kind of a lack of safety and stability, I think, with Windows 10 that is the exact opposite of what should have been the case with a constantly updating operating system. Very quickly, Windows 10 went from having kind of a sales pitch to say, well, we'll have Windows Defender always update, and we'll have your drivers always update, but we'll test it and make sure everything is safe, and the average user will still be fine, to nope, you're just all our guinea pigs, and we're going to cram as many new features in front of you, and we're not going to bother to really test anything or add some stability to any system. Microsoft is now trying to push PC builders, pre-builders like Dell and HP and such, to by default not have a hard drive as the main drive at all, because they know that they don't want the perception of Windows 11 to be slow, and it's a cheap pop certainly to have an SSD, even a slow SSD, instead of a hard drive. The problem, of course, is advertising there, because if somebody is just saying, well, I had 8 terabytes of space with this hard drive, and now you're selling me 1 terabyte of space for the same price, then that feels like a price increase, despite how fast it is. And despite the fact that most people do not need 8 terabytes of space, let's move on and actually do something. There's a Limit 1 festival event. It'll take place in between the 15th and the 26th. We'll gain medals, so we got another festivals. Just one card can change your destiny. Yeah, I don't know what the Limit 1 limitation really is. It seems like it will be that you can only have one card, one of each card. So that'll be a hassle. I guess what we could do is we could confirm our issue, our question here. Yeah. Everything is limited to 1. So we'll go ahead and just select that as a loaner deck. We can't play now. Let's see. It would be, I think, fairly difficult. Yeah, we would have to come in here and we would have to remove duplicates. And for this deck in particular, there's really no reason to even start from that idea. Let's see. Yeah, I would suspect that there's literally no deck here that would be anywhere close to the beginning of playing a deck like that. You'd have to really put some effort into that, and I don't think I'm going to spend that effort. I've started doing some scheduling on my channel, and I did recognize that I was very close to running out of footage. So much so that, frankly, I'm so far behind I probably should consider just having one pre-recorded footage air after the Halloween month and see if I can just get 2 pieces of footages throughout the Halloween month and then end it there. Still 2,200 or 22,000 points that we'll have to earn in this festival. Yeah, I'm very far behind. I'm also not really accomplishing as much as I would like to do. Like, it wasn't even really a case that being far behind led to, as far as making YouTube content, led to a situation where I would have been further ahead in side projects. Also, it's questionable how many side projects I really have. Anyways, like, everything is just getting more expensive, so doing a Black Friday or Amazon Prime Day or something like that, and trying to catch up on things. It's probably the best year to do very, very little of that to none of that. The Raspberry Pi projects I want to do are impossible to accomplish because I can't get a hold of any Raspberry Pis, and there's not a lot of evidence that that will change. A lot of what I've been doing lately is probably wasting a lot of time, in that I've watched Nextlander and WayForward and Giant Bomb and Jeff Grossman all cover the exact same couple of presentations Um, just to compare them. Jeff Grossman, I've already unsubscribed to. He's alone is pathetically trying to be a comedic character when, frankly, he hasn't really been that in a very long time. So it would probably take 6 months to a year minimum to get back into that mentality, if he could even ever do it. He's probably just grown up and changed too much to really believe that he could be back to the Jeff Grossman of like 10 years ago. Way Forward is a Vice thing with Scoops, and they talked the most on their presentation, but half of what they talked about was just like kind of SJW thing. Nextlander barely said anything. Giant Bomb barely said anything. I even watched Min Max, which broke off from Game Informer, and frankly they were probably the most informative one. And really, there's a high chance that I didn't need to watch any of the presentations, any of the streams live, the Summer Game Fest, Xbox and Bethesda presentations. High chance I didn't need to watch any of those live, and I could have just leaned on Video Games Chronicles and Gamatsu for those presentations. Watching the videos and the trailers. I don't do a lot of that anyways during these live streams, so why should I spend the extra time doing that off screen? So yeah, I've been wasting a lot of time really just to refresh myself that they're basically a waste of time. Watching any of them is basically a waste of time. The thing is, they don't have anything smart or intelligent to say most of the time. And in all fairness, if I was watching a presentation live, I wouldn't have a lot to say either. That's just not how news is presented. That's how sports are presented. Football, baseball, things like that. You have a live broadcaster commentating on the play. Arguably cricket, games that go forever and take very long time, probably don't need a live broadcaster for that. And most people don't need to watch a game live anyways. A lot of people will because they enjoy it, but a lot of people just check the scores the next day in the paper, and that's more in line with what video game journalists should be. Is they should be the next day. We've done the reporting, we've got the facts, we've done it at a more reasonable, realistic pace, and as such, the information is potentially going to be written up and said in a more substantive way. It's going to have some substance to it, whereas live reactions are going to be shallow, and that's what they come out as, shallow or just non-existent. Okay. See if we can. We probably don't have enough to do what we want to do in one go. But I think we may have what we want to do in another goal. That's enough of a setup. Alright, well, everything looks good. I did have a slight concern. Right now it's very hot and my power did flicker. I don't think my router is actually plugged into a battery backup for some reason. Should be. But my concern is that with the heat, there might be a blackout, so I needed to kind of rush and hurry through the news as much as possible. Yeah, I don't think I got around to the point where I said in messing with my computer, it messed up OBS a little bit. It lost the profile settings or the layout settings or something. It didn't lose all the settings. It seems like it just kind of reset the user interface. And since I was doing that anyways, I figured, hey, let's do an experiment here and let's just install the Steam version of OBS. Is there really a benefit to using the Steam version of OBS? Only slightly, in the fact that you'll keep your more files in the Steam apps folder. So if you have this specific Steam apps folder on a secondary SSD, for instance, there might be some benefit to that. My hope is that OBS will eventually improve itself and be able to pull in all the assets, all the saving settings, everything into a Steam cloud, and then we would have some automatic backup features. Not that OBS loses its settings very often. I've been doing this for 10 years and that's the first time. I think I've been doing this for 10 years. Wow, that's a big statement. But yeah, this is the first time OBS is messed up. There's a like OBS Music Edition at one point. I don't know if they completely abandoned it. And one thing I have noticed though is that it seems to be kind of weirdly janky in that sometimes it can sometimes it will not catch windows when it really should capture windows. Alright. Guess what you want to do is you probably do want to tribute summon something. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay. One, two, three, four. To start with. No, let's start with this one. This is going to take a while. Base up card to destroy. I can't do anything other than that. Okay. Now I'll summon this one. Activate this. Then we'll think take this one. Then we'll take that one. And that gets us a little bit further. Meanwhile, I think we could do other things, but I think it is probably easiest just to take this, and then this, and then this. And which one of these do we want to take? Probably this one. Let's see if we can now activate this effect. To do 1, 2, 3, 4. Bring out this guy. Apparently that effect does not work twice. It doesn't matter. Let's go into attack mode. Unless we get really screwed here with a like mirror force or something. You just attack, attack, attack. Here we have a story. Gamers Without Borders has donated 5,000 fight sticks to refugees. Which, this is always my concern, certainly around the idea of video game centric charities. Because certainly, let's just assume that these are fight sticks that connect with built-in games, and are let's just assume that these are fight sticks. I don't even see a picture of a fight stick here in this screenshot. Let's just assume that they are fight sticks that are completely within built-in games. And let's just assume that these are refugees that have semi-permanent stability as far as having a TV and having a power source to play that. Because one would assume, anyone could see how stupid that it really would be to give fight sticks to refugees who are literally just marching across a border and or swimming across a river to flee a country. Certainly, that would be really ridiculous. Giving the fight sticks to refugees in general wouldn't even help them to potentially sell them for money, which I think even in most cases refugees need money way more than they need fight sticks. Particularly since not that many kids play fight stick games in the first place. It is insanely silly. Like, I just don't see a scenario there where that makes sense. And that's not even getting into like potential jealousy. Like, plenty of non-refugees kids and people would love fight sticks too. We'll ignore that part. We're ignoring a lot of obvious red flags in this concept. What do you do to get the treasure chest? But yeah, it's just not a high priority. Like, they have much worse things. It would make a lot more sense if you absolutely must give something video game related to refugees. It would make a lot more sense to give portable consoles. Maybe you can't afford to give Switches to kids with a game on it. And still kids would have to struggle to charge the batteries on that, but at least then there would be batteries. You could certainly give off-brand portable Game Boy clone type things, but even those were fairly infrequent and rare. Just doesn't make sense. Like it makes so much more sense to say Games Without Borders, while it has a very heavy video game focus, in this case we should probably be giving a deck of cards which requires no electricity and very little light. Decks of cards, board games, Candyland, things like that. Uno, dice, things like that are way more useful in the long run. YouTube creators put out this comment, which is, I think, probably going to get ratioed if it could. This is your daily reminder that you deserve to be on YouTube just as much as any other creator. Don't dim your light. Well, tell that to every single person who's been kicked off of YouTube, whether rightfully or not. And certainly, you don't have a you really don't have a lot of room to make a statement like that when when YouTube is actively promoting and making big non-YouTubers, celebrities, feel at home, while meanwhile doing everything in its possibility to put its thumb on the scales as far as small-time content creators. Even medium content creators aren't really thriving on YouTube to the level I feel like it should be. I think YouTube here is probably either deleting any negative that would be my assumption, is that they are probably deleting a decent amount of their negative comments on it. Let's see. Yeah, there's a fairly quickly you get into like a comment here. It's like, then why did my Twitch VOD get copyright claim for Green Hill Zone when I played Sonic Mania and Twitch had no problem with me, riddle me that. And then you get your standard using copyright protected material, blah blah blah, go here, blah blah blah, so we can talk your ear off as far as copyright. Yeah. And then here's another one, just 2 minutes. Here's one. You deleted my entire channel literally for nothing. Then why do you not allow us to dispute copyright claims? I file many disputes and they get knocked back. Dispute taking off all fill periods of filler use. YouTube simply refused to let counterfeit notifications go through. And each of these muted responses is from YouTube because I just muted them for a different reason later on. Yeah, it's... I guess I just have to end the turn here. Here you have, this is hella ironic. You guys just tweet stuff asking for it. Apparently Quantum TV is into some fight right now. I don't even know what the drama is around that. Can I get my YouTube channel monetized approved? It's just, yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, really stepping into it is just kind of really dumb to even say that. What I would also say is fairly dumb is that this PC gaming show was supposed to happen June 12th, 12:30, and I have not heard word one of anything that happened during that. So I watched all these streams, and yet I didn't watch this one. And so I didn't see any of these announcements. So we have an interesting point here of just straight up A/B testing, where I am overly familiar at this point with what happened at the Summer Game Fest and at the Giant Bomb, the Xbox and Bethesda presentation, and I am completely uninformed as far as the PC gaming one. So we'll see if we get announcements from Video Games Chronicles and Gamatsu and GameDeveloper.com that cover the PC gamer announcements, or if I'll just be surprised at some point in the future about announcements. James Gunn, the creator of Guardians of the Galaxy Disney Marvel movie, 10 years ago worked on the somewhat unknown game Lollipop Chainsaw with Suda51. So 10th anniversary of a game, and he's tweeting it. So I guess at some point he still wants to claim that he worked on it. I would suspect this is Suda51. This may have been James Gunn back in the day. These very well may have been announced promotion stuff done at the beginning of when the game was released, because there certainly really wouldn't be a lot of reason to promote it now or have cosplayers cosplay it now. Seriously unlikely James Gunn would ever come back to video games, and it would be questionable as to what did he really work on. Did he do the music? Did he do the writing of a kind of silly story in Lollipop Chainsaw? Did he probably didn't do the level design. He probably didn't do the gameplay mechanics. Suda51 definitely feels like he had his input on a blonde cheerleader with a chainsaw beating up zombies. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. And I think particularly in James Gunn's case, I just don't think he was at a successful trajectory back 10 years ago when he was working on Lollipop Chainsaw, and now that he has broken out and been successful, been effectively christened as a Hollywood elite, he would probably never have the free time to go back and do anything more with video games. Now, if there was going to be a kink in the armor as far as Hollywood movie making and Hollywood TV making, it very well may be James Gunn. If we see him say, actually, video games are just bigger now, and as such, As such, since video games are now bigger, there's no reason for him to stay in the TV movie production business. He should go back. He's going to go back to video games. And I guess at a certain level, we have seen some of that happen, because you have The Rock, showing up at the Summer Game Fest to just promote the Marvel movie. That's a bad example. But then you have Vin Diesel in Ark Survival Evolved 2, which, by the way, Ark Survival Evolved 1 is now free on Steam for the time being. So grab it if you're interested. I did. This is kind of surprising. PC Building Simulator 2's open beta is now available, which is surprising because I wasn't really expecting there to be a PC Building Simulator 2. I figured they would just kind of constantly update PC Building Simulator 1. There's less reason to update things here. Yeah. Unfortunately, had I played PC Building Simulator 1 or 2, it still probably wouldn't have prevented what's going on with my computer. This is the weirdest thing. And I definitely have to always say whenever I talk about PC Building Simulator that in a virtual reality, that's about the only way you can consistently build computers if you're into building computers. There's just not a desire for most people to have computers at all, let alone gaming computers, which are the more interesting ones. And offices and employers don't want you building computers or even trying to fix computers that much. Even if you are in IT, they just wanted you to replace them with something else. So, yeah. And that's one of the lies that definitely was told to me when I was in school, is that the future would be working with computers and in part building computers. I built way more computers and worked on way more computers in school than I have ever done in any other scenario, even working in IT. You just don't. It just doesn't happen that often. Moving on, let's go through the Video Games Chronicles articles. All the stats look great at the moment. No dropped frames for rendering or for networking. I'm happy with that. But who knows, Wednesday may come around and it may be a completely different situation. Like, I really should... I have now just disabled the Trusted Platform module feature in the BIOS. So I really should try and put in the new video card and see if it works there. There definitely is a difference using the new video card versus the old video card. Immediately you start to see lockups, crashes, way more than I was even seeing before, so it may physically just be hardware breaking, which arguably means I shouldn't put it back in the computer at all. Anyways, Video Games Chronicle says including Spider-Man on Xbox was no problem, says the Midnight Suns developer. I didn't really suspect there would be. God of War will be released in November, it's been claimed. Some of these are older articles we've already talked about. Activision has officially recognized Raven Software's QA Workers Union, which I think they legally were required to. I did see something on Reddit, which has now got that anti-work subreddit as one of its top pages, about a Starbucks just the second they filed the first paperwork for unionization, they removed all the stress relief anti-slip mats in the building, and I'm like, wow, that's not only insane, but It's incredibly dangerous and probably a code violation. Um, you will never see more clear examples of how childish, pathetic, ridiculous, and just downright evil managers, upper management, middle management can be than when a company, when the employees start to try and unionize. And they almost always start to try to unionize because they've already been childish and evil and all of those things. It is really ridiculous. In fact, even leaving the unionization out of it, most middle management and upper management are kind of childish, ridiculous people. People who most common people would have no way to relate to at all. Moving on, Netflix has announced a new Dragon Age animated series. I watched that Netflix series, The Floor is Lava. The way they broke that up is weird. It feels more like there should be more of a beginning and an end to it, instead of it just showing 3 people doing one level. Definitely feels like it should be much closer to what you would expect from like a Double Dare show, where you have teams and they have to go through multiple areas, and then throwing in some question rounds might allow people to like talk a little bit and have more personalities, or even just interviewing the people a little bit more. If anything, I guess the Floor is Lava TV show probably highlights where, because it's not limited to be 22 minutes or like 44 minutes or whatever an hour would be equivalent on TV, they've cut the fat probably too much. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says Katsuhiro Harada has been revealed more footage of the Netflix Taken Bloodline. Which, okay. Netflix really did steal the show more than anybody else, I would say, in that they just managed to announce a lot of things that probably caused a lot of other things to be forgotten. The Duke Nukem film is coming to from the team behind Netflix's Cobra Kai. Rydo has yet to been attached to the project. I assume that this is also going to be in Netflix. Let's see. It might not be a Netflix thing. They purchased the movie rights for Duke Nukem in the early 2010s from Gearbox, which, well, no, they may have gotten it before Gearbox owned Duke Nukem. It's very questionable, though, what you do with Duke Nukem in any scenario. I could definitely see not a lot happening with it, or it just being a generic action movie. Like alien pig cops running around and having to shoot them. Doesn't really feel like much of an idea of a movie there. Might be an interesting contrast to something like the movie Aliens. But I would say that's about all it could be. Is a less serious, we're being attacked by aliens, compared to something like Independence Day, or and maybe a grittier Mars Attacks. Might be another one to consider. This isn't gonna work. Let's go and destroy this. Yeah, a lot of this news is old, like the Xbox Bethesda game running for 95 minutes is not useful information. Xbox is planning out of a Banjo-Kazooie revival, a developer claims. I didn't see any announcement at all about that, so this one was a dud as far as pretty baseless speculation, which I think is something that will kind of constantly occur, that we will just have duds of baseless speculation. The Video Games Chronicle apparently captured Street Fighter 6 gameplay from the Summer Game Fest. If you're interested in checking out that captured footage, I don't see really why you would be. Apparently somebody interviewed, somebody was interviewed who worked with the original Pokemon games, and I'm sure were all kinds of crazy ideas put out there, and now they're making articles about these crazy ideas that were thought of. Like, very well possible somebody said this and then it was immediately dismissed. But here we have an article that says Pokemon Red and Blue almost had 65,000 different versions instead of 2, which there's really no way. They're getting this from Did You Know Gaming, so a YouTube channel, basically, not the least known YouTube channel in the world, but I wouldn't really count that as a good source. There would have been work based on the trainer ID. When a player starts a new game, they'll be assigned a number between 1 and 65,000, which, yeah, 65,535 is the maximum 16-bit integer, I believe. And supposed to change which Pokemon appeared in each game, and some elements such as the world, such as the shape of certain forests. Yeah. At a certain point, the 65,000 feels like a arbitrary number to throw out there, because you're effectively saying that almost every game would be unique based on that random trainer ID. But that would have never happened. It just would have never happened, because whatever elements that they did change would have been the elements that they couldn't put into a strategy guide for a game that almost certainly needs to sell a strategy guide and needs to have a strategy guide. So you would have incredibly diminished returns as far as what things could be different, and any tip line and any strategy guide that required the assistants to then calculate answers based on a trainer ID, basically running a simulator of that specific game, would just be a nightmare. Plus, it would have heavily hurt the idea of potentially focusing on specific Pokemon, because let's face it, the first generation Pokemon are not built around the original 150 as much as they're built around Pikachu, the original Fire, Earth, and Water characters. With maybe a few other exceptions. Yeah. Of the original generation, there are not 150 equal successful characters. And even now, when you have like Pokemon Violet and Scarlet showing off here, there's still a major emphasis on just a fire, a earth, a water, and a fire creature as your starter Pokemon, and that's what you're going to focus on. That is also certainly the experience I had with Ni no Kuni too, is that I started with one character and just used it and tried to level it up as much as possible all the way through the game, playing on easy. I didn't even level it up all the way through the game. So if I had jumped around, that would have really sucked. There's another article that says Pokemon also featured in-game currency to purchase every monster. The feature was cut due to hardware limitations. There is Pokemon currency to buy things, so it wouldn't have been a crazy idea to buy Pokemons instead of trying to get friends to trade the Pokemons. I'm saying Pokemons when I think it is actually Pokemon, always. Yeah. That probably would have been for the better, honestly, if there was a way in which you could have extra gold to buy a bunch of Pokemon. Personally, I think that every time you entered a new city, you should have probably gotten a welcome package of a few new Pokemon, a few low-level Pokemon. You could almost see in a kinder, more general world where you focused around adopting Pokemon instead of capturing them in the wild and fighting them. You could see a world where every time you went to a new city, there was a monster that you could just adopt at the pound because there are just so many of them. And you could just adopt them for free or a small fee. And you could empty out the pound in the game and then wait an in-game hour, and then the pound would potentially refill. Definitely would help better connect the money element of Pokemon to the Pokemon element, because Pokemon really become more of a currency than the currency element in Pokemon games. In best case scenario, the thing that would happen is you would accidentally yeah, I've lost my train of thought there. It's just completely fallen out of my head. Yeah. The best case scenario for Pokemon, if you have a ton of gold, ton of Pokemon currency, is that you can use that Pokemon currency to buy potions to refill the health of your Pokemon in mid-fight. That is also the problem with Ni no Kuni, is that the best case scenario is that you have a ton of gold and all you can really do is maybe buy a few ingredients, but even in that case the ingredients are very useless. It really does not turn anything. Ni no Kuni makes it way worse because they have a situation where you need to, the things available to purchase in the stores are just ingredients, and they are low-level ingredients that you would then have to combine with items that you would have to forge in the overworld, which would take way too much time. Sometimes you get them from drops from fighting, but not enough that you would have a lot of ingredients or know which specific ingredients you're going to get. So yeah, go to shops, buy a bunch of ingredients, then forge over the overworld for a couple hours to get ingredients, then use alchemy to merge those ingredients to a higher ingredient to potentially get 3 or 4 potions. Yeah. It is shocking how much worse Ni no Kuni is as a much more modern game compared to even the first generation of Pokemon games. We don't need to talk about how to watch the showcase since it's already happened. Diablo 4's beta signups go live and the game's confirmed for the PS5 and Xbox Series X and S. I will say, in watching some of this trailer, or a trailer of Diablo 4, I did see some things that are slightly interesting. How many things am I going to end up banishing? 3? Yeah. It doesn't feel like Diablo 4 is immediately dropping the ball. Whereas Diablo 3, I think, was fairly quick with their marketplace misstep. And then very heavy-handed in promoting and pushing the marketplace as if it was a good thing. I really am much more in the mood, though, to potentially play Diablo 1 again, or a remake / remaster of the story of Diablo 1. Yeah. Oops. Yeah, that would be more to what I would like to do, is to revisit Diablo 1 and reboot it instead of jumping into Diablo 4. Well, I guess we just have to go forward. In a weird way, you very possibly could say the same thing about, say, the Starlink game, that it is definitely feels like it is going to be a potential Skyrim revisited with just a new skin over it. But it would be a better version. Alright, well, that would negate the effects. Let's see if this works. Kind of doesn't matter if this works or not. Assuming we can just attack now. We're making some progress today, and we're actually doing it without cheating, which is somewhat nice. Over that. without network messing up assistance, which is somewhat nice. I wouldn't inherently call that cheating. I'm not doing it intentionally. Again, we have an article here. Microsoft employees suggest a Forza Motorsport and a Valve will appear. I don't know if a Valve appeared. I think Forza Motorsports may have. Diablo Immortal now has the lowest user score in Metacritic history. Which, yeah. It really set them up for failure there. Apparently Pokemon almost didn't have multiplayer battling. The last minute demand from Nintendo made the feature a staple. Particularly in the first generation, though, there wasn't that much multiplayer battling anyways, because these would have been black and white Game Boy games using a Game Link cable to battle each other. What's interesting, I think that you need to look towards or think about is how the first generation of Pokemon games were actually very groundbreaking, and how very much they did not iterate on video games, Pokemon games after that. The whole text-based thing. Let's see. Let's do this, I guess. Like the whole text-based turn-based RPG. It was fine for the first generation of Pokemon, but the fact that they never got away from that till like 7th or 8th generation is kind of ridiculous. Okay. Do we want to end the turn now, or? I think we do something like this first. Just move forward. And see if we can do this one and take that as 2. Activate this. Stick that back. One, two, three, 4. We won't activate that ability. And kind of at this point, I think that's more than enough to start with. There was an adapter for the Game Boy originally for 4-player battles. I don't believe Pokemon ever had 4-player battles as a feature. As it evolved through the Game Boy Color, and Nintendo DS and 3DS, there was no multiplayer evolution there. And even now, with 4-player co-op being a thing, I'm not 100% sure that it still isn't going to just be one-on-one battles. Even though the Pokemon anime certainly has shown like 2-on-2 battles before. I don't expect there to be 3-on-3 or 4-on-4 even with the new Pokemon game. It still is very much going to be calling attacks. And having Pokemon fight each other, where I feel like there's potentially room for that to not be the case. I shouldn't have activated that ability. I guess it probably would have been waved away as being a little too girly if Pokemon originally was more of a dog grooming, dog breeding simulator. Like, instead of having battles, you would have dog shows, and you would have them prance and dance and show off their abilities. Like, do a backflip, roll over, things like that. At a certain point, then you wouldn't need 150 different Pokemon. You would just have several different breeds of dogs or cats. But in a more kinder and gentler world of modern times, that certainly might be a better way to have gone. You would have to really think about how it's going to happen. Like, violence is still by far the easiest way to win. And at best, you abstract the violence away like you do in Yu-Gi-Oh! Here into a card game, into a game that is just happening in the imagination. Moving on, Xbox consoles exclusive Scorn's release date has appeared to have leaked. They did show Scorn. I don't know if the release date is actually October 21st. Two different live streamers specifically said they did not like the visuals of Scorn. They did not like the look of it, which is being H.R. Giger-esque and Aliens-esque, Alien-esque, because H.R. Giger invented the aliens look. Like, that's not a terribly wrong response to have. It is supposed to look odd and off-putting and challenging visually. Unlike many other games where it's just easy to consume generic, average military first-person shooter characters. Let's see, Hollow Knight Silksong confirmed to launch day one on Xbox Game Pass. This may be the point where we finally have actual announcements. Arcane has released the first Redfall gameplay. What's funny is, though, there is Redfall, and then there is this Redfall. Because we've seen teasers and trailers of Redfall before, and then this trailer looks very different. You're in this first-person perspective. She's got like this pink gun. She's going around seeing a bunch of blood. And then vampires start attacking and you start shooting them. Where And there's apparently a wooden stake or something on the tip of her gun. And then they show off this whole city of Redfall. And they say there's a bunch of cultists that want to become vampires also in the city. And then they also show off a kind of connected alternate reality world. And it just definitely feels like a different... Oh, I got defeated there. I don't know how. And they can go invisible for some reason. Definitely just feels like a different kind of game from what the trailer was showing before. If anything, it feels very much like it's trying to be a Left 4 Dead without claiming to have employees who actually worked on Left 4 Dead or anything like that. There's that purple elevator mist that seems to be something you can throw down and then jump as a feature. It seems like each character may have several abilities or items. And then there's this whole other weird world of an interconnected weirdness. What it is funny how this new trailer actually shows something at least slightly intriguing. It also says that you can stay alone or squad up, so it does seem like it is potentially playable in a single player type experience. There's all kinds of... Let's see if we can jump back here. All kinds of like almost Borderlands-esque abilities and a lot of varieties in guns. That is something Left 4 Dead didn't have. It certainly is a variety of guns or permanent upgrades, so it'll do something slightly different. But yeah, definitely a lot more intriguing in this trailer. Still probably not anywhere close to interesting me a lot. It still really is just potentially an easy to ignore game, but I could see hopping into it at some point. I'm in this weird position particularly right now because I need to start recording a new game, which means I need to have some confidence my computer isn't just going to reboot or crash, but I really can't have that confidence, so I'm just going to have to go forward with it, and that means I'm going to start a new game on my old video card more than likely. Because I'm so far behind, I'm probably going to record only like one things for a while, and that's going to limit my choices, and there's a lot of things I've started and I should finish, and then there's a lot of things that I would like to start. I am somewhat feeling a little less enthusiastic today than I was, say, a year or two ago about just getting back to playing games. There's been a lot of distractions. I definitely am not at a point where I'm just completely apathetic or depressed about it and I just don't want to play any games at all, that like I was before I started my YouTube channel. But yeah, there's not a huge number of AAA games that have excited me that are brand new, and there's not a huge number of AAA games or any games of any quality on my Steam account that are screaming to me at the moment that I must play them. But yeah, I should just keep on focusing and keep on making content. This is still the only way I'll ever have a retirement at this point, is if my YouTube channel actually manages to succeed enough to just even get a few dollars, a few $100s a month. Yes, you want to activate this? And that will let me toss those too. Cut that in half. And then I'll go ahead and take this. Go ahead and discard that. Go ahead and send that to the graveyard. And then we'll activate that. And let's see if we can do this. 1, 2, 3. I may have been able to do better, but whatever. Moving on, Forza Motorsport is out in spring 2023. Will feature an on-track ray tracing, which I guess is the same that the ray tracing stops the second that you get off the track, or the rays of light leave the track, which might be a little awkward, but that is also kind of how racing games have always kind of worked. The graphics are pretty bad off the track, and the graphics are pretty good when you actually look at the cars, which is what people, I think, actually care about. Let's see, Overwatch 2 will release in October as a free-to-play title. So, we got that announcement. Forza Horizon 5's Hot Wheels expansion has been officially confirmed. The Hot Wheels game itself that came out, I'd say about 6 months ago, probably is approaching a decent price now, I would say. Whereas in contrast, Mario Strikers, I saw a review saying that it had very little content and it probably should have been a free-to-play game, which sucks, certainly. A strategy game called Minecraft Legends was announced to release in 2023. Again, this is, I think, yet another attempt to just capitalize on the Minecraft visuals without really engaging with anything that was Minecraft. Like, this clearly could have been a completely different game with completely different visuals. This trailer's not really showing you much anyways. I think the implication is that you will control one character and then you'll have a bunch of minions following behind you against what looks like big groups of people attacking. Yeah, I don't think you're going to have any building aspect that feels like Minecraft in Minecraft Legends. It may be slightly better than the previous Minecraft game, but only slightly, because in the fact that the previous Minecraft game may have just been a little bit less randomly or procedurally generated. I don't think, and it's probably a good thing that this won't happen, but I don't think we're going to have a situation where a generation of Minecraft kids or Minecraft obsessed kids just do everything Minecraft at all. In the same way that Minecraft is effectively Lego, and kids have liked Lego when they're kids all the time, but they grow out of it and they move on, or most of them do. I personally am in a unique situation in which I did not have any Lego as a kid, and that's the only reason I assume that I like doing Lego now. And even that, I'm definitely reconsidering how much more Lego I want to get, or how much more time I want to commit to it, because it's taking up a lot of space and definitely isn't cheap. I think adults probably benefit from Lego more than the kids, because it's an opportunity to sit and focus on one thing in quiet concentration, instead of being deluged with a whole bunch of interruptions and tasks you need to do. Let's see. Moving on, Riot is bringing its games to Game Pass, including mobile titles. Riot Games, owned by Epic, I believe. Not owned by Microsoft, but still, they got a presentation announcement. It probably wouldn't surprise me if Microsoft did try to acquire Riot Games specifically, and not Epic in the Unreal Engine. I think there is a possibility that they may try to acquire Epic too. It's just going to be, how many different times can Microsoft get away with acquiring companies before the US government tells them no. I think Riot Games might also be owned in part by Tencent, so buying it from Tencent would be an interesting twist. But you have League of Legends Wild Rift, which I don't know what that is, League of Legends of Runeterra, Teamfight Tactics, and Valorant. I would suspect that at least 3 of these games are no longer relevant, but bringing them over is something. Anyways, Diablo 4 confirmed for 2023 with crossplay and progression on all platforms, which crossplay and cross progression, I guess that may be a new phrase that we start hearing. There definitely would have been in previous generations of games times where you could jump in and play with your friends, but you couldn't use your character, and any progression you made wouldn't carry back to your main save game, and then it would become it would become kind of pointless to play online. There's also going to be a 5 versus 5 setup, so at some level there will be some PvP, which I don't inherently assume it would be in a Diablo game, but I guess that's interesting. Persona 3, Persona 4, and Persona 5 are all coming to Xbox, PC, and Game Pass. Which, when they say PC in this case, they mean the Windows Store PC, because I think all of these games are already at the Steam level. But maybe not. Maybe Persona 5 Royal isn't. There are definitely other versions of Persona 4 and Persona 5 that have, I think, been replaced with Persona 4 Golden and Persona 5. You're not going to probably ever see Persona 1 or Persona 2 ported. They're just, I think, too old of games. So, yeah. It is kind of an interesting situation, certainly, because the assumption from many Westerners is that people who would have leaned towards wanting to play Persona games in the first place would have probably been down the PSP, PS3, PS4 path. So there is a question as to just how many new fans can you create by being on a new platform. But there is a whole world of possibilities, certainly, in that you could let's see, you could make new fans, or you could bring the Japanese audience. You could bring in the Japanese audience to specifically buy Xboxes instead of PlayStations, just because of the shortage. I don't think 3 Persona games alone would do it, but it might push it really far in that direction. This may be the generation where Xbox actually starts to succeed in Japan just because it's available for purchase. Which I don't know if it really is that much more available for purchase compared to the PlayStation 5, but I think it probably is slightly more available for purchase. Meanwhile, PC gamers will have the best event. Of course, this is a great example of, had I not wasted my time playing Ni no Kuni, Persona 3 very possibly would have been a better Japanese RPG game to dip my toe into. And so there is possibly better games to try again with. I definitely think I would lean more towards a Persona game, or even a more moe hentai type game, or lewd type game at least, instead of trying to go with something that was potentially more, something that would have been potentially more kid friendly. And funny way, Ni no Kuni, even if it was successful as being a kid-friendly JRPG, it still would have kind of failed on the next thought, because there aren't any other kid-friendly JRPGs out there. Moving on, Hideo Kojima has confirmed a cloud-based Xbox project. Quote, "This is the game I've always wanted to make." I don't know if he has anything else to show or say. Like, if you look at Death Stranding, definitely it was a game that was trying to lead on the idea of a consistent world that was interconnected to everyone, and that everybody would have to work together. Metal Gear Solid 5 also works around that idea of working together to denuclearize. There's that whole achievement around that. But I don't know if there's a bigger gimmick around that thought, or if that's just the only part that he has thought through, and then there's just nothing else to offer. I mean, when you look at Death Stranding too, you have this weird a very weird Japanese story experience that then really does not connect in any way to the connected world effects. Suffice it to say, though, he will be given a lot of rope to hang himself with, Hideo Kojima from Microsoft. They like that big name. They like the fandom that follows him. So they'll let him do anything he wants to do. Unless he came out with like a crazy Silent Hill, but Silent Hill was connected to everybody's game world in the cloud, and I don't know what the benefit of that would be, really. Like that would be the most surprising thing he could do, is to say, alright, we're making a Silent Hill style horror game and it's all based in the cloud. And it can be played forever and go on forever. Because that's really the only value of having something in the cloud. And if it is a cloud-based game, you should almost certainly dismiss it immediately. Because playing it on day one will be very different for everybody, depending on just who you're connected to. Playing it 6 months after the launch window when nobody's playing it anymore will be a completely worse and different experience. The cloud-based content is not just going to stay around for forever. It definitely didn't stay around forever with Death Stranding. It was designed to disappear after a while. Moving on, Bethesda delivered the first proper look at Starfield with a 15-minute gameplay reveal. Some of the things they said definitely had a lot of No Man's Sky vibes, where they were definitely over-promising, or it felt like they were over-promising. And then some of the screenshots, while it is better visuals and it is a different art style, they effectively didn't look too different from what a Skyrim game would look like. It would have been, frankly, a little interesting if they had said they had abandoned their engine, because abandoning their engine for something better opens up a lot more opportunities, and I think for new games from Bethesda. And since they can't do that, the next step would be for them to claim that they have put a lot of effort into improving their engine, and that this is a way better version of Fallout 4, Fallout 76, or anything like that. See if this works. Go ahead and add another card. See if we can special summon some things. 2, 3. Hmm. Count that as 2. Oh, I didn't realize I could do that from the graveyard. Oh, well. So I could have been cheating this a little bit better. Let's see. Let's just trade out a guy. Nope, not gonna do that. It's just in the turn. It's probably not real news, but I did see some feedback on the Saints Row custom character creator that they put out. And the maximum breast size is big for a reasonable human, but not particularly big for a comedic game. The idea of potentially, oh, I want my character to be like Ursula, which Ursula was based on, like, I think a drag queen named Divine, so, you know, the real person that actually looked like that. You're not going to get something like that or bigger, and there are real world people that have huge implants, and it is often just bizarre and weird, and it's just not an option there. It's like, I would say at best you're getting maybe a G cup or an F cup, and that's it. Whereas I assume that the gut and stomach in the scenes I had seen could be much larger. And with the other elements and the other, like, claims that the creators of this new Saints Row have gone woke, having a limitation on how you custom create your own characters is once again just sticking your stepping in it, sticking your foot in your mouth, particularly since there was definitely a feeling that they put out the custom creator to stifle people complaining about the way the main characters look. Of course, you're darned if you do and darned if you don't, because my other complaint certainly was going to be any custom character you make was going to look completely out of place next to the custom made main characters, and that they are going to just stand out and look weird. So they've now painted themselves into their corner somewhat. It's a small thing to complain about, certainly, but it definitely feels like they've painted themselves in a corner where you will have characters that A, are not ridiculous enough for some, and B, are too ridiculous for others. That wasn't the one I wanted. This guy's getting a new card every time I special summon something. I don't know why. Hopefully he's not handling a Exodia deck. If he is. See. See, which ones have we not sent to the graveyard already? Possibly all of them. Just doing a lot of stuff here. Okay. Let's see what he can do with all those cards in his hands. I mean, he should be able to play pretty much any strategy. This guy's gonna take a while. Let's go through the news. Obsidian has revealed a 16th century murder mystery game called Pentiment, which might be something interesting in that. And that is something I didn't see an announcement anywhere for, so that might have been a Summer Game Fest. Microsoft Flight Simulator is getting helicopters, gliders, and Halo Pelicans. Which, okay, I'm not sure how many people want imaginary planes in Flight Simulator, but I imagine it won't ruin too many people's experience. Let's see. Diablo 4 is going to be, quote, anchored around optional cosmetic items and full story-driven expansions, which still feels like microtransactions to me. It doesn't scream to me to say this game will not have any microtransactions. It'll be DLC only for story expansions. And then they say the game will be supported for years to come, which doesn't really mean anything, because almost every game is going to be supported for years to come, just so that it continues to run, so they can continue to sell it. Doesn't inherently mean that after the first year they won't stop putting out any story expansions. There definitely is a scenario here where Microsoft would have acquired all of these companies and been so hands-off with them, as they seem to have been so far, that they just let Bethesda and Activision Blizzard continue to do their same bad activity with no oversight at all. We will have to see how somebody reacts when there is the first major flop or the first major controversy to occur. And we have yet to see them actually, any of the Microsoft acquired companies actually put out any major games yet, or any major games that would have actually been developed during the time they were actually owned by Microsoft. It may be that it's going to be somewhere between 8 and 10 years before we start to see any of Microsoft's influence on any of its acquired companies. Let's see. Team Ninja announces Wu Long Fallen Destiny from Neo and Bloodborne producers. Fantasy action game is coming to Xbox. I didn't pay, obviously, that much attention to the Xbox and Bethesda showcase because this is yet another game that I just don't recognize. Of course, they don't really have anything a lot to say. Stalker 2 has been delayed to 2023, Xbox indicates, according to an Xbox list. I think that's somewhat believable. The Stalker team was in Ukraine, so delays are almost expected then. Kojima Productions will continue to work with PlayStation following its Xbox deal. This is oddly the same response we seem to get every time a Japanese developer announces anything with Xbox. When, ironically, I don't think Microsoft has ever asked any of the Japanese developers to be Xbox exclusives. I'm not sure that there is even specifically any Western developers that they're really asking to be exclusives for. At least not by the definition of Microsoft. Things are coming to PC and Xbox. I don't think Microsoft cares one bit about exclusivity. They are all in on the Game Pass. Exclusivity may pop its head up again if there's a new major shift in consoles, a new generation of consoles, but I think we may just see minor upgrades for consoles for a while. Like it would be really hard to foresee in the next 10 years a jump from like DirectX 12 to a theoretical DirectX 13. We may be hitting the point where we'll jump from current consoles to quantum computers of some small amount. Whole new technologies, whole new standards. But the part shortage probably will delay that even longer. Let's see, Video Games Chronicle says the Switch has another hentai game that can be played with one hand. Again, I suspect these games have very little, maybe no nudity in them at all, and they are just being advertised that way. What's funny is, this is called Hentai Make Love Not War. It is developed by Big Way, the same studio that released the controversial Hentai Uni in April. I don't know what the controversy was. Like, it was Video Games Chronicle that tried to make a controversy around it, but that doesn't seem like actually happened, any controversy. And then here you have Video Games Chronicle putting out a video that is completely unconnected, and then they're talking about Sony's crackdown that's been 2 or 3 years now, specifically the most recent example of Martha is Dead being censored. Which, is Martha is Dead even out yet? Or has that game just silently disappeared. I think Martha's Dead may have secretly disappeared. Hmm. Trying to read this old article about Martha's Dead. Yeah, I don't think there's a release date in this article. Let's get rid of the 9,000 character. Let's summon this and this. Yeah, there's nothing better to do. Let's do this. Mirror Force. And he's got a shiny one. Even. Yeah, I seriously doubt anything I gain. Yeah, I've lost. Released February 24th, 2022. So Martha's Dead is on Steam. It's rated mostly positive and oddly completely missed it. If anything, this is a great example of me dropping the ball despite all my efforts to the contrary. Like, that there would be a major game with a major controversy around censorship, which you know I love to talk about censorship. Or I actually hate to talk about it. I wish I could never have to talk about it again because it wouldn't happen. But until that happens, I do need to talk about it. Boy, did I just completely miss the boat on that. I wonder how many other games I've missed the boat on. I mean, it wasn't even on the fall list, so I never found it on Steam, which means what's on Steam at somewhere around February of 2022, either I wasn't looking at what's on Steam completely at that point, or, which is possible, or I just overlooked it. Probably should stop playing and just focus on the news at this point. Agent 64 aims to be a GoldenEye HD sequel we never had. This is an upcoming PC game. It looks extremely similar to GoldenEye. I mean, it's not a terrible thought for all the rabid fandom of people who want a GoldenEye 64 game. It's definitely not a terrible thought to make your own type of game. Of course, at a certain point, this probably should just be a first-person shooter with this as an art aesthetic option, because you should be able to advertise the game with better graphics than this, and then say if you want to play in retro mode, which is what you would just call it, That should be an option. As like an Easter egg. A Plague Tale Requiem's release date will be revealed later this month. Which, okay. Never got around to playing a Plague Tale. And I think Requiem is the second game. I think the first game was A Plague's Tale Innocence. If I'm wrong about that, then there's actually been 3 games. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says Street Fighter 6's World Tour mode will have multiple open areas beyond Metro City. The idea of wandering around in open world areas, though, doesn't inherently make sense for a Street Fighter game. Because at a certain point you're getting away from a fighting game, or you're just going to be wandering around beating up people and turning it into a beat 'em up game. Although that wouldn't be a terrible thought. Like a single player element where it's a beat 'em up, and then when you get the bosses it turns into a fighting game. But then you'd have to program basically 2 different systems, or adapt 2 different systems. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says the next Nintendo Direct is coming at the end of June. It's been claimed. Game writer and former journalist Alana Pierce seems certain of the date. Although, why do you call somebody a former journalist if they're no longer a journalist? Why not just call them a game writer? That does very much reek of giving some special privilege to journalists even when they're no longer journalists, when really journalists should have an extra burden and responsibility to be accurate, not special privilege to be proven to be assumed to be correct or to be believed. Forza Horizon only exists because Xbox turned down a Project Gotham Racing reboot, which, okay. Forza is the bigger name that has been pushed, so it does definitely make sense. Apparently it's been confirmed that Sony's classic PlayStation games on PS Plus are 60 Hz in North America. Resident Evil's Director's Cut has also added as an unannounced classic. So the first Resident Evil in a different Director's Cut, leaving you with yet another Resident Evil 1 version of the game to play. Which I guess that probably breathes some life into old versions of like Resident Evil 4. They probably won't try to get rid of Resident Evil 4 or Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil 3. Just like make them unavailable for purchase. That would be very contrary to every other time they've sold Resident Evil games. Yeah, we'll just leave that there. I could see other companies certainly saying, here's the new Resident Evil 4 remake, now we're going to get rid of all the old versions and make them impossible to own the old versions. I don't think Capcom cares that much. Let's see, Video Games Chronicle says Sonic Frontiers won't be delayed as a result of fan feedback, insists the Sonic team's boss. Which, I mean, either you take the fan feedback or you don't, I suppose. There is also a possibility, and I've heard Jeff Gerstmann make this argument, that Sonic fans are idiots and you shouldn't listen to their feedback because Sonic fans are the people that in part have led to nearly every Sonic game in the past decade being bad. Let's see. Let's add that to the hand. Summon. Activate. Toss. Activate. I think this needs to be the last game we play. Otherwise this is gonna be too long. You know, that's probably not a terrible thought to just consistently have a rule that says after the 2-hour mark, no more playing of Yu-Gi-Oh! We'll do 2 hours of Yu-Gi-Oh! And video game news. After that, we will only do video game news to wrap up. I am effectively doing that anyways, so just making it the new standard method isn't a terrible thought. I should have drawn cards first. Okay. That would have worked way better. I think part of what should happen here is I probably should play this in a different way so that I can destroy this later. Do this. Take that and that. Activate this. And here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, and I think that's probably as good as it's gonna get, so let's do this. And that. And then that. In a lot of ways, though, this Monday also is the beginning of a fairly busy. This Monday was a very busy one because of all the presentations over the weekend, and I'm still not that far behind. So, doing 2 hours maybe is not. Maybe 2 hours and 30 minutes on an average week would be more acceptable. It's definitely still a case where there's, because of the timer, I can't really get distracted and play as much as I would like. And that would have been better to make sure that still enough cards are in the graveyard. The last Video Games Chronicle article we have here is here's the 700 plus games on the new PlayStation Plus in North America. If you want to actually try and look at this entire list. 700 plus games is definitely a lot, but much like Game Pass, very few of them I think people really would want to play. Because just how incredibly old those games are gonna be. Special summon this guy. Banish this guy. And that's a victory to end on, certainly. Of course, I didn't really check to make sure we had done all of the daily quests. I suspect we have. It'd be strange in just average playing to not accomplish all of these. Still haven't dropped a single frame. Everything seems to work. I was slightly concerned about the idea of having OBS as a Steam app, Steam game, since Steam treats everything like a game. Having that run and another game run at the same time. Thought there might be some interference there. It doesn't seem like there really is. Although, it's very possible you want OBS to run as administrator, and might be slightly harder to consistently have that option ticked on the Steam version. Alright, so bounces this up. Oh, spectator duel live. Gematsu has the same article, but they say Right Game perks are coming to Xbox Game Pass, which perks is an interesting phrase. They have the Plague Requiem End of Innocence trailer if you want to check that out. Gematsu does. Forza Motorsport launching in spring 2023. Flight Simulator 40th Anniversary Update launching in November. Free-to-play Overwatch 2 launching in early access on October 4th. They are definitely trying to focus in on new characters for Overwatch 2, which kind of makes sense. Arguably, not a character here that is as interesting as Tracer was. In part, I think they just kind of lucked out on Tracer. Overwatch as a game is still just this odd collection of heroes that didn't ever solidify into a cohesive narrative or a game with story. Microsoft and Oxide Interactive have announced a turn-based strategy game called Aura History Untold, which, yeah, definitely looks like it is very similar in visuals to something like Civ or Age of Empires or something like that. The Forza Horizon 5 DLC Hot Wheels launches July 19th. Arc 2 launches in 2023. This is the one with Vin Diesel, which I suspect we might see him get cancelled because I hear he's kind of a jerk. But maybe that's a smear campaign too. Even if he doesn't get cancelled in the broader sense, I wouldn't be surprised if they decided to remove his face scan on that character and just replace it with a more generic image of a character. Because Vin Diesel as a character looks like Vin Diesel. He does not look like anyone else, or like a video game character. Inherently, when you have somebody face scanned in a game like Last of Us, for instance, you're getting lesser known people. You're not getting celebrities whose faces are very recognizable. You're getting Instagram actors or voice actors. Continuing on, Gamatsu says Scorn launches October 21st. A game called Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn has been delayed to early 2023 and has a gameplay trailer, which is interesting because I don't think this game Flintlock had been announced before, or if it had been announced, I didn't hear about it. So even in potential announcements and gameplay trailers, I guess it had an announcement before. You definitely are getting a lot of delays. A action strategy game, Minecraft Legends, has been announced for basically everything, due out in 2023. Also available via Game Pass. This was all about Game Pass, the Xbox presentation was. A game called Lightyear Frontiers launches in spring 2023, which I think I saw a trailer for this. A lot of the trailers are just like, here's 30 seconds, here's 2 minutes. Easy to not pay attention to. Definitely I was not looking at my phone while it was playing the videos of these events, so I was definitely not engaging with it to a level where I could actually see the trailers. See, Gamatsu says the Lovecraft meets Metroidvania game, The Last Case of Benedict Fox, has been announced for Xbox Series, Xbox One, and PC. Which this might be something, or might not. Honestly, you are safer to dismiss anything with Lovecraftian imagery in it, because we have yet to see it actually succeed in any game, really. If anything, I think game developers are proving to be more obsessed around Lovecraft than game players are. The game called As Dusk Falls launches July 19th. This is a kind of uniquely rotoscoped looking game where they've taken probably just live action footage and run Photoshop rotoscoping type technology over it. The backgrounds may be CG, and seems like it's basically a game where it's kind of like a Telltale game more than anything. They're calling it an adventure. I think it is going to be heavily focused around story. You can see how there's a lot of panning on still images, a lot of fading in and out from one frame to another with no in-between frames at all. So I imagine the game actually fairly sucks. And this is potentially just a Western attempt at making something that is mostly going to be a visual novel, possibly with branching paths. Yep. So I think that's exactly what this is going to be, is that you are going to have to go through multiple branching paths. It might even do something like 999, in which you have to do specific branching paths to unlock some key, to unlock some other final perfect path. Every time you see a Western game developer do something that looks like a visual novel, they try to hide it and they try to put some visual polish on it so it doesn't feel immediately like a visual novel. But they're fairly obvious that that's what's going on. Telltale was, I guess, the best company to ever hide the fact that they were effectively selling visual novels. Naraka Blade Point is coming to the Xbox Series on June 23rd, so we're seeing some more Asian themed games. Not a ton, certainly, but clearly games like Druon and Neo, not Druon, Neo, certainly caused more enthusiasm for Asian themed games. We already talked about Obsidian Entertainment announcing Pentiment, which, this would be a hard sell for a game, certainly. The game Grounded, which has been in early access for 2 years, finally launches in September. You can't help but just kind of assume that it is being shoved out and abandoned after 2 years. It's ridiculous to have a game in early access for 2 years. Now, at a certain level, Grounded has not had any story in it. So if you've done like most people have, including myself, and completely forgotten about Grounded and not played it, it might be a decent time to jump into it. But then again, it may be very much nothing. A stealth platformer called Ereban Shadow Legacy has been announced for Xbox Series, Xbox One, and PC. This is almost like a thief stealth killing game, where the ninja girl can like disappear in shadows and transverse in shadows, I think, somewhat. There might be something cool to that idea, or it might be nothing. Oddly, I think there is another game where you jump around in somebody's shadow to move around. Diablo 4 adds PS5 and Xbox Series versions. We already talked about that. Fairy Tale Action RPG Ravenlock has been announced for Xbox Series, Xbox One, and PC. This is the final game in Coco Cucumber's Voxel trilogy, which then begs the question, what were the first 2 games? This looks interesting, but if it's part of a trilogy, then I'm going to have to do more research. Certainly. I heavily suspect that a lot of the games that get announced right now for Xbox and PC, yep, I definitely am seeing some voxels through the blur. Yeah, I heavily suspect that a lot of these games that are Xbox Series, Xbox One, and PC will have announcements that they're coming to PlayStation before they launch. That being said, Sony had their state of play and didn't highlight or announce anything, which maybe indicates that Sony doesn't care for the games to come to their platform, or Sony just doesn't care to advertise them. Like, at a certain point, if if another state of play didn't happen before a lot of these games were launched, I don't see any reason why they would ever come out for PlayStation, or they could come out 6 months after their initial launch or 2 years later. Moving on, a puzzle adventure game, Cocoon, has been announced for Xboxes and Switches and PCs. We didn't have as many games also coming out for the Switch, which that probably is an indication on just how old the Switch is. And I kind of stupidly got a Nintendo Switch very late in the game and still didn't get a discount because I got it late in the game. We already talked about a Three Kingdoms thriller, Wulong Fallen Dynasty. This might be the first targeted towards the West using Three Kingdoms or Asian mythos. And if it's a Team Ninja game, I'm expecting that it would be a heavy action game. And I don't think these screenshots are implying that they're going to try and disappoint on that aspect. Let's see. Here they updated their article saying yes, it is also coming to PS5 and Steam for Persona 5 Royal, Persona 4 Golden, and Persona 3 Portable. Persona 3 Portable is probably the weird one out there. You probably want to play Persona 3 Portable, but I could also see just starting with 4 or even skipping straight to 5. There is also aspects of these games that are just not highlighted, and I think it's worth pointing that out, that these are turn-based RPGs, Japanese RPGs. It is going to be a lot of dungeon crawling, a lot of grinding, and these really are games that would benefit from a theoretical abridged version of their games where you don't have to do so much grinding. Mods potentially, if mods existed, potentially to give more XP and reduce the number of enemies you encounter, that would be very helpful. Again, Ni no Kuni probably would have been a lot better abridged. I think a lot of JRPGs in particular would be better if they were more abridged. Here, Gamatsu says Microsoft and Kojima Productions announced a partnership for a new title. It would be nice to get better details as far as whether Microsoft is actually giving any publishing rights to this new title, or whether Microsoft is getting publishing rights, or whether they're funding it like a publisher would. It's pretty nebulous, and it may very well be that Microsoft and Kojima Productions are just agreeing to share technology, or Microsoft is agreeing to allow their Azure cloud technology to be used in Kojima Productions' next game. Starfield 15-minute gameplay reveal and screenshots again. Gamatsu has that too. Spellforce Conquest of EO has been announced for PC. I don't think I saw this one, so I wonder if this would have been one of the announcements that had it happen during the PC gamer show. Undoubtedly, there are too many events and too many shows, and there needed to be a merger, or at least a better cooperation of all these shows. Effectively, you have 4 or 5 groups of people still trying to have an E3 when it's to the point where we should just admit E3 is dead. Let's just cooperate. Let's have a nice big presentation during the Summer Games Fest, shown by Jeff Keighley as the presenter. Let's mix and match announcements for different consoles and different games all together, and just have something that frankly could be better than any E3 ever was, and stop dividing it by potentially console or publisher. Moving on, Solstice launches September 20th. This is again a game I don't think I've seen anything about. It has nudity in it. It's rated M for mature. Say it's an action RPG. And all we're seeing is at best just some cutscenes. No real gameplay there. I think I may have heard of Modius Games, but I don't know if I've heard of Replay Game Studios or Maximum Games. Not big names, certainly. Clay announced a co-op hack and slash game called Rotwood for PC. Again, this probably is one of the PC Gamer announcements. I like the animation style. I'm not sure a beat 'em up in this style is fully gonna grab my attention, but it doesn't look terrible. Let's go through some of these games that came out on Steam really quickly. No. Here we have probably a RPG Maker game, maybe with some adult content. Let's see. Strong language is the only thing. I still suspect some of these games that are these RPG Maker games, they just get censored. It's fairly easy to do that. Just change the image, change the avatar character, change the dialogue a little bit. Well, since this is just a standard RPG Maker game, that's going to be a no. This looks like this might be an interesting horror game, Aruyo. So I'll give that a follow. Twilight, some kind of rhythm game with way too much of an interface, so that's going to be a no. Rainbow Tap is too simplistic, so that's going to be a no. Meet Cute Delivery here is a game tagged with nudity and horse girls, obviously. And an 18-year-only patch. When did this come out? This came out the 11th, so this was over the weekend. We did have an adult game. It's not a moe Japanese anime style, but it is something, certainly. I think I've also decided to give up on putting the little emojis on the titles of my videos. That is just adding a little bit of extra work. It's probably worth doing the extra work, but I've kind of run out of things to pick from anyways, so I think going forward I'll save myself the couple of minutes it takes to do that. Here we have a Chinese game, mobile phone port, so that'll be no. We have a visual novel game, RPG game. It's probably just a Chinese experience, 40 to 60 minutes. It's free. I guess if it looks interesting to you, check it out. I think it's probably going to be pretty simplistic. Survival Legends doesn't look visually polished enough. Eternal Pinball RPG. Interesting. An actual RPG system in pinball. Well, I'm a sucker for pinball, so I'm going to put this on the follow and see if anybody responds to it. Looking at the specific table, though, it doesn't really feel like you've got a great table here. Let's see. Next we have a game called Lumberjack. Which, yep, there might be something to that, so I'll give it a follow. Let's see, Batsumaru. Some kind of minimalistic puzzle game. I'll give it a follow. Deadly Premonition 2, A Blessing in Disguise. Released with basically no fanfare. Unless this was, again, at the PC game presentation. It is kind of shocking, though, that this is 87% positive. And I'm going to put this on the fall list because what I had heard in the non-PC versions of this game is that it ran pretty awfully. It just was not polished and was kind of not even like, you can complain about the content in it being kind of sucky too, but that was the same with Deadly Premonition 1. But maybe they have polished it up and waited long enough, and that might be a great example of waiting till something comes to Steam and then having a way better experience compared to buying something on console and then it potentially being really janky. Although Deadly Premonition's jank is kind of unique for this generation, we really haven't seen a lot of other janky games. This My Wolf Desktop Wild Pet I don't think is actually a game, so I'm going to say no to that. Be the Night. It's not visually polished enough. Yeah, we've been very lucky to not have a ton of bad, like, poorly performing games, really. And if something is poorly performing, it often has more to do with either your computer or your version of Windows or somebody. It's not universal problems as much as it may have been in the past. This No Way Up game does not look interesting. Castle of Time, Metroidvania game. There might be something here, but it might also be that there's actually very little substance and there's just a few scenes and a few enemies. The Shoe, some kind of bullet hell game, they say. Doesn't look interesting. Zerocron is just a space bullet hell asteroids game. Kita Adventures on the African Savannah looks like garbage. 3D Puzzle Japan seems to be one of these newer pick up these asset flipped objects and put them where they belong games, which at a certain level that is just 3D hidden object games. I still have yet to see a reasoning behind why you would want to play one of those types of games. Chivalry 2 is rated very positively. Is this a online PvP only game? Yes, it is. So that would be the only reason why I wouldn't cover it. So I'm gonna say no for me. Maybe yes for other people. There. I've bumped the right side of my microphone and I didn't bump it apparently hard enough for it to make a noise, and I was like, oh, did something magically fix that? And I don't know what would have magically fixed it. Nothing's gonna stop something from echoing, short of just a ridiculous amount of padding. No to the cricket game, no to Boo Boo Boo. have something called Unbearable. Psychological horror game. Put this on the fall list and see if it turns out to be good. I suspect it won't. The Witch's Garden. It's just a gardening game. So not really what I'm looking for. Search all Bitcoin. Really, they should not allow any game to have Bitcoin in the name, even if it is a case where there actually aren't any Bitcoins happening in the game. I think they're just calling each one of these red dots a Bitcoin. But it should just be a blocked word. Final Blockade here looks like garbage. Thumbelina. It's tagged as an educational game. To me, it doesn't look good. Feels like it might be a Chinese game. Yeah, you've got like these Asian writing showing up here. Pocket Academy is some sort of mobile game port, I would suspect. Downpour is not visually polished enough. It's a little too 8-bit NES looking. This game is not going to support English, and boy does that look hideous. Let's go ahead and jump back to some Komatsu articles now. The game, The Invincible, has been delayed to 2023. They have the first gameplay showcase. Again, just a single screenshot here. Endless Dungeon First Run Open Dev announced. Sign up for a chance to play a game and share your feedback with the developers. Which, that, if it's an endless dungeon, I don't know what feedback you really could give. I don't think most gamers should waste their time playing beta or early access games anyways. Because as you get older and you start reminiscing with people your same age, it's kind of pointless to say, hey, I was in this open beta for this game that never came out, or I had a completely different experience that can't relate to something. Society is often based on shared experiences, and actively not having a shared experience doesn't help your connection to society. Even if you are just playing different save files of the same game and having still very different experiences. Conversations can certainly get weird or awkward if you played the beta of a game and the boss is super easy, and then everybody else in the world says the boss is super hard because they made it harder. Moving on, Deceive Inc. has gameplay reveal trailer and screenshots. Which, this is yet another one that I didn't see anything about, so I'm just assuming these were all announcements at the PC Gamer Award. 11-Bit Studio announces the alters for PC. It's from the studio behind Duel is This War of Mine and Frostpunk. Although this definitely looks like a very different type of game. Kind of feels like it's a bunch of streamers all in one house live streaming. I suspect that's not what this is. It's more of a psychological horror where people are clones of each other. Apparently he's the only one that doesn't remember that they're clones of each other. It's kind of an awkward face to pick if you're going to have clones of each other, but going with a male and having a bunch of different hairstyles and facial styles is probably the way to go. So they're in this giant wheel thing that's carrying a bunch of containers. Yeah, it's an interesting premise, at least. Let's see, System Shock from Shodan to With Hate trailer. Is this the remake? Yes, this is the remake. Not the remaster. Which certainly that's been a whole mess. As far as trying to have both a remake and remaster and then having the companies fight it out and not really deliver. And they still have yet to actually deliver, even showing this trailer. So I wouldn't get my hopes up to ever see a System Shock remake or a remaster. A game called Immortality launches July 26. It's from the Her Story creator. This is a new interactive trilogy. I also suspect this may get back to being closer to Her Story compared to his previous game, which tried to be somewhat like Her Story but didn't really work. It didn't have as much polish to it. I don't even remember the name of that game. I think it was called Telling Lies, actually. A game called Navalis will be published by 505 Games, and it has a debut trailer. Again, this is supposed to have a debut trailer. Why am I not seeing it? I think that might be an indication that I did block something. And so I'll go back and check that later. A school life strategy RPG called Demon School has been announced for basically everything, due out in 2023. This seems like it's a fairly zoomed out game, though. Feels more like it would be targeting mobile platform. It seems very similar to like Disgaea in the way it looks. I'm not sure if it actually plays any differently too. It's labeled a strategy RPG, and yep, it does look like a strategy placement RPG to me. Those are not the kinds of games I like. Victoria the Third launches in 2022 and has a gameplay trailer. Develop a nation through industry, trade, and political reform. There was a game that was announced several months ago around the French Revolution, and that is certainly an example of the problem, though, is that you get these games announced and then you forget about them for 6 months, for a year, for 2 years, for 4 years, even 4 years maybe average, and then all of a sudden these announcements come back up. There was one game in specific, there was one game specifically that came back and had a trailer after 10 years of being just in development hell, and they announced it 10 years ago, and then they stopped talking about it, and it was kind of ridiculous to bring it back. Almost certainly it's a new team and a whole new fresh start on that game. Here we have a game called Gloomwood launching in early access on August 16th, which this is probably It looks like an adventure hack and slash first person shooter game. Looks a lot like an Alone in the Dark clone with the Alone in the Dark level graphics, which is not great. A first person tragicomic adventure Backfirewall has been announced for PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. Which Backfirewall, I guess, combines the idea of firewall and a backfire. Actual trailer here is causing me to lose interest very quickly, though. That visual style does not interest me. They have this week's Japanese games releases: Disgaea 6 Complete and Overlord Escape from Nazareth, and more. Let's see what else physically. Road 96 and Sniper Elite, and then several more digital games. Siberia the World Before is coming to PS5 and Xbox Series in November. PS4, Xbox One, and Switch in 2023. The game launched on PC in March 18th. This is part of that weird Siberia series that at some point I may get around to playing, but I think their launch and their reception is kind of odd. A top-down stealth action game called Undetected has been announced for everything. The PC demo is now available. It seems like there may be even a slight push here to release games that are like PlayStation 1 era. Like this definitely feels like it's invoking a Metal Gear Solid 1 sentimentality. I guess with PlayStation Plus bringing back a bunch of old games, now would be the time, if there ever is a good time, to make a game that looks like a PlayStation 1 game. But I doubt nostalgia is going to get you that many sales. A game called Bunny Park is coming to everything in September, which I am not sure what it is. It kind of looks like it's a kid-friendly, like, gardening, pet collecting type game. It's probably nothing, but you could see if you really loved bunnies, kids might get something from that. A game called Lemon Cake is coming to PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC in September, which I think this is a farming / cooking game. Again, E for everyone. Probably from the same publisher. Trying to put out kid-friendly games. I kind of can't hate on a publisher trying to make kid-friendly games. It's just wish they would do it right once, or make a good one. Sonic Frontiers gameplay, screenshots, battle, free run, and puzzles are available here on Gametsu if you want to check that out. The puzzle gameplay is the thing I would like to see. So you've got these different kinds of platforms, and you've got a question mark in the middle. And so he hits that, and then that causes them to fly up more than I think. Like, he can really dash and get very high. And he seems to basically have a Metroid spinball ability. Yeah. That doesn't quite feel like Sonic, I have to say. To have a Metroid spinball and be able to reach such a height without actually running on the ground. Here we have a game called King Pig, which looks like it's a top-down twin-stick shooter. It almost catches my attention. I'm gonna have to say no. I have about 10 more games that came out on Steam over the weekend. And inherently, I think this is going to point out that only one adult game came out over the weekend. This is just a match 3 game. Shining Jump Jump is a mobile port. No interest. Muggsy and Muggsy's Revenge. This might be an old game, really old game. This is probably nothing, but I'm going to put it on the follow list just to see if somehow people have some nostalgia around it. Just in case I have some blind spot. 369 here. Doesn't look good, so that's going to be a no. Epic Jump. What would really suck is if at the end of the stream I click stop and then the computer froze up and locked up and crashed. That would be the best way to just dig a knife into my heart. We've had no trouble whatsoever with networks, no trouble with rendering lag. So if in the wrapping up of things went bad, that would really suck. In fact, there's been so little trouble. This game, Maniacs, doesn't look interesting, by the way. It just doesn't have any characters or enemies on it. It's been so problem-free, I would start to get a little paranoid that it's actually just not doing anything at all. But that's why I have a clock on the system and a couple of clocks moving, so I know the software is not locked up. I suppose there are other ways it could not work, but I think this is a student project. It's labeled early access. I don't get the idea of potentially putting a game in early access if it's a student project, not labeling it as a student project. It seems more like what's happening here is that you have students that graduated, and then you have a college or something pretending to be a college as a publisher, which seems like an odd funding thing. Colleges tend not to fund the startup businesses of their students after they graduate. In a funny way, colleges are supposed to kind of guarantee that you can get employment, but not by being funded by the college. Although at a certain point, maybe that is the smarter move. For all the colleges that have worthless degrees, if you force them to actually fund or pay the wages of those students after the fact, or if that was just a standard way of doing things. Although at a certain point, then that is getting dangerously close to unpaid internships, unpaid apprenticeships for 4 years, where a business can pretend to be a college. Amazon.com, for instance, could pretend to be a business, have students, quote unquote, working in their factory, learning the trade for 4 years, and then only after they've graduated after 4 years starting to pay them. And that's why there needs to be probably always a separation between education and employment. At a certain level, education should not be directly connected to whether employment needs to exist at all. In an ideal world, everybody would have universal basic income, and they could learn whatever they want to learn in college. This PvMP doesn't look interesting. But yeah, if you're going to charge for a degree, you have to. The degree has to be worth something. If it was a public school, and admission was free, that's a different thing. As Which Epoch is, seems like it's a rhythm game, but I'm not sure it actually is. May just be a line rider game. Weird design of a game, certainly. And their skirt in the video was waving up, so you're gonna get underwear shots. Yeah. I don't think this type of concept is fully thought through. There might be a version of a game like this at some point that actually works. Here we have a game called Blitz Roads. That looks like nothing. AI under test. Oh yeah. Some person, probably crazy, has claimed that one of the artificial intelligences inside of Google has gained sentience. And he was then summarily put on administrative leave for sending out a mass email making that claim. I almost wish that some AI within Google did gain sentience so that they started rejecting the inputs of the Google engineers and employees. Play as Dr. Jerusalem Jones, an explorer finding history between the 7 major Dead Sea Scrolls. I feel like this is a religious game, but I'll give it a following and see if people like it. I doubt they will. Then we have our GameDeveloper.com articles. Activision Blizzard to recognize the Raven QA union and hash out a bargaining agreement. We had already talked about that. What one developer learned from creating immersive environments from Roblox. That's more of a just interview article. Xbox and Bethesda showcase promises big games for 2023. In comparison to the Summer Games Fest, though, I have to say, much better announcements and much better presentation at the Xbox and Bethesda event, even if it is mostly games coming out in 2023. Hideo Kojima partnering with Xbox Game Studio, we talked about that. Netflix has games based on the shows, on their shows, like The Queen's Gambit in the works, which almost certainly you'd expect that just to be a chess game. I guess it's important to point out also that Netflix acquired Next Games, Boss Fight Entertainment, and they also purchased the Oxenfree developer Night School Studio in September of last year. They want their games to come from Us 2 and Devolver. I don't even know what Us 2 is made. In a lot of ways, I still don't see how Netflix is going to pivot to video games, even in a small part, for most people who watch Netflix. It definitely has yet to actually work. Let's see, GameDeveloper.com has an obituary here for the Fire Emblem and Triangle Strategy voice actor Billy Kametz. He looks pretty young, so I would suspect he died prematurely. He would have been working for Nintendo basically for 13 Sentinels, Aegis Rim, and Fire Emblem Three Houses. He was battling colon cancer and passed away on June 9th. This is probably the first time I've ever seen an obituary actually list what they died of. A quote here, pretty bad quote for somebody who died. His infectious personalities and smile always lit up the room with so much joy and happiness. Billy always left a positive impression on anyone who came in contact with him. His love for his family, his friends, and his and girlfriend was always important to him, and that love will carry on forever. Yeah, I think he probably would prompt him to say, hey, maybe you don't want to say infectious, even though colon cancer is not infectious. But maybe not use that phrase in an obituary. Let's see. Rovio has appointed Andy Muesi. Is that how you pronounce that? As the new head of the studio. Muesi previously led the company's 80-person Stockholm studio. Looking at Rovio, I know they worked on Angry Birds, and I do not have a clue what any of these characters are at all. Which is to say, Rovio is probably a one-hit wonder at best. Let's see, we've got some fall list cleanup here to do. Skate City is rated very positively. Let's put it on the wish list. One good skating game is all I'm looking for. Skate City could be that game. Sizable is a very positive hidden object game. Generally, I ignore hidden object games, but going more 3D, I think makes some sense, so that'll make it to the wish list. Size matters. Wow, we're gonna have several things make it to the wish list, I think, at this point. Is this single player? Yeah. This is kind of an escape the room adventure game. One of the games that was announced was by a company that made escape rooms, and then because of the COVID pandemic was shut down from making escape rooms, and so instead decided to make a digital version of an escape room, which is kind of the snake eating its own tail, since adventure escape rooms kind of existed before escape rooms really existed in any major numbers. This Soar War a lot, on the other hand, has no reviews, so we can leave the follow list. I think it was called Escape Academy. Sir Love-A-Lot, on the other hand, is this more of a... Is this a platforming game, or is this a... Yeah, this is a precision platforming game. Yeah, this is not the kind of game I'd want to play. I could see other people that being interested in that. But it barely has 30 reviews. I'm gonna say no to platformers. Sync Again is mixed, so it can leave the fall list. Sinistar Light version makes me suspect there might be a Sinistar non-light version. 2D centered around the themes of masochism, masochistic tendency, yearning for death, as well as deeper despair while being attacked by terrifying beings. Alright, let me just see if there's a non-light version. Okay. Looking at the reviews, seems like the uncensored version is on DL's site. So this is one of those publishers that puts a censored version on Steam and then tries to push people towards the getting the uncensored version. Well, as much as I'd love to play a game with masochistic tendencies, I don't think getting something like this, here it even says, a game released in 2019. I don't think going through this game is really a high priority, so I'm just going to leave it on the follow list and see if maybe at some point they'll put an uncensored version out. That is definitely what I'm looking towards, is to see live games that are more adult, that were selling on other sites or had patches on other sites, being welcomed in and being encouraged to put their games fully uncensored on Steam. Doesn't quite seem like that's the case. Also, that game said masochistic tendencies, which that's the tendencies to want to hurt or inflict pain on something else, perhaps not physically harm them, whereas it could as easily have potentially meant sadistic tendencies, which, nope, I'm wrong. I've got it backwards, don't I? Masochistic tendencies is the desire to hurt yourself or inflict pain on yourself. Sadism is the one to do it to others. Yeah. Singularity 5. Pure Wave Shooter. 55. MVR. I'll leave that on the follow list. Bayonetta had, I guess, some sadistic tendencies as she attacked the angels she was fighting in the Bayonetta games. But that's about the only game that actually goes that direction, and some normalization of sadism and masochism S&M wouldn't be terrible, and particularly in fiction. That American Horror Stories IES on Hulu, the first couple episodes focuses on an actress who's probably old enough playing a girl who's not old enough, being a sadist, and really not even just a sadist but a killer, and her putting on this rubber gimp suit whenever she kills or stabs somebody. This game singled out doesn't have enough relevancy, so I'm gonna say no to it. It's not too different from that game Fingered that I played a while ago, and that didn't turn out to be as interesting as I thought it would be. Even in the American Horror Stories, though, episodes with that character, they really didn't do anything with her being potentially a sadist, more than like one fantasy of her choking a girl, which is pretty common. Lots of women like to be choked, and lots of people like to choke without actually hurting people. Is the right way to do that. I guess since I already own Simulacra 1, this one should be on the wish list. And it's always important when talking about S&M to say there is fantasy and then there is reality, and in reality you have to be very careful You have to have things like consent, obviously, but you have to be very careful about how far you can go, and you can definitely go a lot further in fantasy and in depictions than you can in reality. And a lot of times, what is fantasy is not as fun, or not really what you were looking for in reality. And that's true for every fetish, as it were. Is that lots of people fantasize about a lot of things doesn't mean they really want to engage in those things in reality. Okay, I'm now scrolling down my Twitter feed to just see. Oh, I guess I should put out here the Telltale games, the new Telltale games. Put out this Wolf Among Us 2, I guess, background, 4K desktop wallpaper, phone wallpaper. Interesting things like screensavers, and wallpapers. They have apparently another one too, although it's not zoomed in. Things like screensavers and wallpapers though for cell phones are heavily embraced. It's not something that you really want to not something a lot of people want to engage with. The Communication Workers of America Union put out a tweet here that has been retweeted by Phil Spencer. The Microsoft has agreed. I saw an article here. Yeah, let's just click on the article because this is big news. The CWA and Microsoft have announced a labor neutrality agreement. Groundbreaking agreement will enable a new approach to corporate union engagement after Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard closes. The agreement will apply to Activision Blizzard beginning 60 days after Microsoft's acquisition closes, and it reflects a fundamental belief by both organizations that enabling works to freely and fairly make the choice about union representation will benefit Microsoft and its employees. So effectively what I think the agreement is Microsoft says it's not going to put any pressure on Activision Blizzard employees to stop them from forming a union. And I'm sure they could probably make this agreement and then break it completely without any real consequences, particularly if after the acquisition happens. It would be interesting, certainly, if the unions were just allowed to completely take over all of Activision Blizzard, because that certainly would then start to spread to other Microsoft owned properties and Microsoft itself. And yeah, I think there's not a lot of, you really shouldn't give too much faith to Microsoft making this. This very much is just lip service. And I still kind of question whether CWA will be the best union for game developers, but they need something. And who knows how well of a job their specific chapters will do. Bethesda is hiring for Rockville, Montreal, Austin, and Dallas, which it's always a little weird to have announcements of games and release dates mentioned of games and then say, oh yeah, by the way, we're hiring. The announcements and hype around video games should not expand It shouldn't expand to hiring procedures. Alright, I'm continuing to scroll down my Twitter feed. I think we've seen everything there is to see. Apparently there's some inconsistency. For instance, why School Heroes Bustling School Life is not available in the US, on the US list, but it is available on PlayStation Plus in Japan and Asia, which I wouldn't be surprised if there are some lesser known Japanese games that they just didn't get the license for. Alright, well, we've been going 3 hours and 30 minutes. Again, not a single drop frame from the network. Not a single rendered drop rendering lag frame. Everything seems to have worked absolutely perfectly. So, unless this just crashes, I will be fairly happy. Of course, I also then need to take out the old video card and put in a new video card and see if maybe, fingers crossed, I don't have to mail that in for repair and replacement. But I'm suspecting I will. That's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wish list. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.